is there anybody in there? 6 months ago, I set up this strictly cardboard-only worm bin to test and see if worms will live and thrive on literally nothing but cardboard. There'll be a link at the end of this video to the original cardboard-only worm bin experiment, which I did about 2 years ago. However, that bin was set up using guinea pig bedding, and then it was fed only cardboard. So in essence, although I managed to grow salad crops, I'll link to that video as well, in the harvested what I called vermi-cardboard, it wasn't a pure cardboard-only worm bin. This experimental worm bin has had and will have nothing but cardboard. So plain brown cardboard made up the bedding, and it's only been fed plain brown cardboard ever since. Looking around the bin, you can see the worms have been active on the walls and the roof. Lots of worm casts on there, and the casts on the handle tells me that there's been at the very least a few escapees. If we look down here, we can see one that didn't quite make it. So there were 27 worms at various stages of development, and not all of them were adults, and there were no cocoons when this bin was set up. So seeing a cocoon here is a good sign. Another observation is that the bedding actually feels quite cool to the touch, almost cold, especially in comparison to the bedding in the worm tower. I'm guessing that it's no more than about 12 C or 53 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to count the worms now, and I'm going to make a couple of assumptions while I'm doing it. So I'm going to discount the first 3 weeks to allow all of the worms that we started with to reach maturity. So I'm assuming that from week 4 I have 27 mature worms. Remember, I started off with 27 worms at various stages of maturity. So I'm assuming from week 4 they were all mature adults. I'm also assuming that each adult worm produced one cocoon which had one viable egg in it that produced one live worm every week. And I'm assuming a time scale of 12 weeks from the cocoon being laid to the worm reaching adulthood and being able to reproduce. And don't forget then it's on a rolling weekly basis. So in week 5 I would have 27 cocoons laid, which would reach maturity in week 17, and so on. Now, having made those assumptions and looking for around the 430 worm mark, let's count. So the final count was 421, which is very close to the 430 mark I had in my head. I'm also very pleased with it because the worms look very healthy. The bin is thriving. It's at the very lower end of the reproductive rates that you would expect really in a healthy, thriving bin. But nonetheless, it's close enough to the mark to make no difference. So on that count, I think it's a good indication that this cardboard-only worm bin, the worms are really doing very well in it. I wouldn't say thriving, that might be an exaggeration, but they're doing very well. So I'm just going to very carefully return these to their home. Some of them don't want to leave the little seed tray, so I'll give them a little bit of encouragement. And I'm going to add some cardboard to this now, just plain dry cardboard. It's quite wet, the cardboard that's in there, so I'm not going to wet the cardboard as I added it in. mix it up a little bit, put the lid back on, and then I'm going to leave that back in its position. And I think probably Christmas would be a good time to come back and have a look. And around Christmas time, I would expect to have between 800 and 1,000 worms. And that may be close to the maximum number that I'm going to get in this bin given the surface area. So as always, thanks for watching. Bye for now.